will be invited to present their papers, and then we will have a small open question and answer session, and we will end by lunchtime.
Good afternoon. Welcome all of you to the second session of this international conference titled Restorative Justice from Crime Prevention to Conflict Transformation. First of all, I'd like to thank Professor John Braithwaite for his insightful comments and interesting speech on his extensive restorative justice experience, and once again welcome him to this conference. We are very lucky to welcome Professor Braithwaite to our country to discuss restorative justice. Restorative justice is an extremely important issue and concept for Bangladesh. Our country suffers with overcrowded prisons, huge backlogs of cases in courts, trials that last for longer than they should, and a lack of legitimate solution to crime, and in particular petty crimes. This conference is a landmark for our country. Raising the awareness of this important response to crime is vital to the development of its increased application in Bangladesh. We are very grateful to all our national and international experts and speakers and resource people for coming to share their experiences with restorative justice all around the world. We want to learn from this experience, but also tailor restorative justice in a way that works best for Bangladesh. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Jeremy Simmons, an expert in peace building and conflict transformation, primarily working in the Philippines, and Mr. M. Asadullah, Reconciliation Ambassador for Reconciliation Canada, with extensive experience in reintegration and using restorative justice in prisons. I look forward to a fruitful discussion and successful conference that result in real policy change and community development in the area of resolving petty nature crimes. At this stage, I would like to request Mr. Jeremy Simmons to present his paper titled title is not clear. Just I would like to request Mr. Jeremy Simmons to present his paper. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, it's not clear what the title of the paper is, but the title of our conference is Restorative Justice from Crime Prevention to Conflict Transformation. And while I wait for the PowerPoint to start, I will say I went to my colleagues in the Philippines and I said, do you have any data on recidivism related to restorative justice in the Philippines. Could I get some help with us sign in on this? And they said, we have the data, but it hasn't been compiled yet. So I said, okay, then I will shift my discussion a little bit. And since Dr. Braithwaite has already just mentioned some of that technical information on recidivism and restorative justice, that frees me up to talk a little bit more and focus on this question of crime prevention and conflict transformation. And what do we mean by conflict transformation? So we will take some time to look into this. Now, conflict transformation is a concept that includes personal, relational, cultural, and structural understandings of conflict and justice. So what I want to take some time today is just share a little bit about how restorative justice has been used in the Philippines. I also want to look at how we can deepen our understanding and appreciation of cultural and social resources for restorative justice, and then expand or connect these ideas of restorative justice and conflict transformation. Bangladesh is at an important time, kind of at the beginning of sowing or planting the seeds of restorative justice. And so we can look at how we can do this in a way that makes the seeds of restorative justice grow deeply in Bangladesh, because it will look different here than anywhere else in the world. There's a quote here. Socrates said, "The secret of change is to focus all your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new." So we know the problems, we know the issues of the overcrowding, the challenges of the justice system, the legal process here in Bangladesh, very similar to the situation in the Philippines. But we are focusing on building or planting the new. Let me share a little bit about the justice system in the Philippines. And a little bit about the Philippine context. I have been living in the Philippines for 20 years. I'm a third generation in my family to have lived in the Philippines. And I'm living on the island of Mindanao, which is in the southern part of the country. It is a little bit smaller than the country of Bangladesh. And in Mindanao, we have three main groups of people: Christian communities, Muslim communities, and tribal communities. And so there have been blessings and challenges of having this kind of demographic, this kind of diversity. Mindanao has a unique history. The Christians came from the north, the northern part of the Philippines, and they settled into Mindanao. Policies of the government promoted this settlement and displaced and marginalized the Muslim and tribal communities of Mindanao. And so that has led to a series of insurgencies or civil armed conflict in Mindanao. The issues of corruption, of resource land conflicts, and the unequal distribution of wealth. So these conflicts are embedded in a larger situation, a larger context. The legal system in the Philippines was imported or brought in by the Spanish. So the Philippines has a colonial history, It was the Spanish who colonized the country, and for 333 years, the Philippines was part of Spain. And so the Spanish implemented their legal system called the Código Penal in the Philippines. They just simply extended the law of Spain to the Philippines. This went through a series of reforms and revisions. Essentially, the Spanish Penal Code stayed the same in the Philippines through 1930. And then the Philippines was, at that point, had become a U.S. colony, so it went through a series of transitions from being owned by Spain, and then the U.S. took the Philippines from Spain, and so they revised the legal code into the revised penal code, and that, until today, is essentially the law, or the criminal law within the Philippine legal system. It has not undergone any changes. So what we see was this legal system from outside was put in place in a country that is of Malay cultural understandings and values. And so what that raises the question for us, and what I want to suggest, is that when we look at the stakeholders in restorative justice, we'll talk about victims, offenders, and community. I would like to suggest that culture also be one of our stakeholders in the process. Because there seems to be a connection between the cultural values that we have and our concepts of justice. When I first came to when I first came to Mindanao, and I wanted to understand how can we implement restorative justice in the Philippines. I had spent 5 years in the U.S. implementing a school-based restorative justice program, very effective, conducting hundreds of facilitations. But I had this idea, when we come to the Philippines, it's not going to look the same. And so I went to one of the traditional leaders, one of the tribal elders on the island, and I said, and I just wanted to learn, how do you handle conflict in your community? How do you handle conflict in your community? I had a master's degree in conflict transformation. I've conducted numerous restorative justice interventions, and his response to me was, do you know how to solve conflicts between plants and animals? And I thought back to my advanced studies in conflict transformation and all the mediations I had done, and I had never done one between a plant and an animal. And so I realized I have something to learn here. The understanding of conflict is different. And Dr. Jen Hong Lu, the head of the Asian Criminological Society, has developed an understanding that compares a Western or European approach to justice with an Asian approach. And Dr. Lewis from the University of Macau in China, and he says or suggests that in the West, we rely on what's called a conflict approach to justice. And in the East, or in Asia, traditionally we rely on a relational approach to justice. What does this look like? So in the Philippines, for example, we have the Spanish law. Here in Bangladesh, received a British-based law. What is this Western way of understanding justice? And this can be sensitive because it touches on some of the sensitive dynamics of our historical experience between the West and Asia. But colonial justice would be based on an individualistic culture. So what we value in the West, we value independence, individual rights. We have a materialistic understanding. We're looking at what is in front of us. What can we actually see? And we tend to be very analytical. How do we break things down in our mind in order to understand? And so the concept of crime or violence that came out of that is focused on the state. And the process tends to be oriented towards the offender. And Dr. Liu calls this a conflict approach to crime control. So it is similar to conflict management. I get my lawyer, and the other side gets their lawyer, and they fight it out in court. Not physically fighting, but it's a win-lose situation. And maybe the judge, I don't know, I have some judges here, I don't know if this is totally accurate, is a bit like a referee. So this relies on a formal process. It involves exposing the truth. Let's figure out what happened. And there's an assumption that then we will know who is guilty. And there will be some negative shaming of the guilty party. And so we're using a legalized conflict to solve another conflict. And if this sounds a little funny, that's because maybe it is a little funny. Because our cultural understandings are different. Here in Asia, many countries in Asia, we have a communal culture. What does that mean? Our values are oriented around the relationships, the attachment, the social connections. So, my children in the Philippines have been adopted, sort of. They have adopted Filipino grandparents. And we would visit them on a fiesta or on a holiday. We would go around and visit our relatives. And then my children would go to the elders in the community and they would put their hand on their forehead as a sign of respect. And so honor is very important. Harmony and what we call integrative thinking. So the kind of thinking that connects the relationships, not just what we see in front of us, but what is going on in the background. And so the concept of crime is relationally centered. And the process would typically be focused in the community. So this is the relational approach. So it's all about the connections between us. So a relational approach traditionally would be very flexible. Prior to the legal system coming into place, there were indigenous or community-based systems that were in place. And that usually would involve the elders in the community conducting a kind of mediation. But it would not necessarily look like even the mediations that I've conducted. The elder would go to one side, they would talk to them. And then they would go to the other side and talk to them. And then they would go back and there would be venting back and forth until they had come to an agreement. And the agreement would be formed actually before the parties had met. The process then of bringing the parties together is to formalize and to ritualize the agreement. Why? Why is it done that way? Because when people are in conflict in the Philippines, it's like if we have a relationship like a string or a rope between us, when we have a conflict, that string gets really tight. And now we have this tension between us. And so anything we do will pull the other person. And we don't want anyone to lose face in the process of the conflict. And that is a big deal for us in Asia. So so that's the traditional way, yeah, that was practiced 50 years ago, 100 years ago. How is it relevant today in our context? Even when we talk to indigenous leaders, they would say, yes, it's important, but we have to update these ways of doing things. So I'm going to share a little story from the Philippines in one of our rural communities, a community where there is an active Maoist or communist insurgency. Three tribal men, went to the forest to gather forest products. Now, the Philippine Army also has a camp in their village. And so these three men went to the forest. While they were there, the Philippine Army was out patrolling. And they saw these men, and they assumed that they were rebels. And so they chased them, and they caught them. Then they took them back to their camp, and they beat them up. The Philippine Army soldiers really hurt them. Afterwards, they were let go, and they realized that they were not rebels at all. They were just men out gathering forest products. And so they went to the chief, the village leader in the area, and they said, "We realize we made a big mistake, and it's going to affect everything for us." So here we have a context of conflict in a traditional situation, but it's a modern manifestation. And so the tribal chief, he consulted with the elders, and he fined the army. He said, "You have to pay 9 horses. 9 horses. Now horses, because there's no roads, horses are the primary means of transportation, of carrying your goods to market. And so 9 horses. And they said, "Why 9 horses? Well, 3 horses per victim." Okay, horses are quite valuable, so that's actually a very expensive fine. And the tribal chief said, "1 horse is for the pain and suffering that you caused to our community members. The 2nd horse is for the shame. They lost face, you dishonored them. So that is what the 2nd horse is for. And the 3rd horse is for the soul, where we recognize the spirit, the spirituality of our people." And so this was their understanding of a collective and maybe a more holistic way of doing justice. And so this, I call this a 3-horse solution, but for many Filipinos, if you talk about pain, shame, and the soul or the spirit, it has a much deeper understanding. If our justice system could address these issues, it would be a more satisfying way of doing justice. So I go around in my work and I share these and I learn from other communities so that we can develop a really restorative Filipino model. And so I went to one of our Muslim communities. They're from the Maguindanaoan tribe, so a different community. And when I shared this story with them, they said, "Yes, that is correct. In our community also, those 3 things are really important. But first of all, it would not be horses, they would be water buffalo. And second of all, we would add a 4th one. There would be 1 more. And that would be 1 point of restitution to recognize the honor of the clan." So again, there is a sense of a collective or a social understanding of justice that is more holistic and more and deeper, that will meet the needs of the particular community. So how do we bridge a modern legal approach, such as we have in the Philippines, and a traditional cultural approach? And this is a bit of a review. We're coming back to some of what we're already discussing. So this criminal justice, colonial justice is abstract, it's focused on guilt, and it means the state determines who to blame and who to punish. As Dr. Liu had said, relational justice, the concept of crime is embedded within the community and a breakdown of harmony. And so the sense of justice, how is human relations, how do we deal with our relationships? And the relational approach involves the leaders conducting mediation or conciliation in order to restore the honor and erase the shame that was caused. How do we bridge this? Well, I think, and what we would say is restorative justice helps us bridge our cultural understanding or sense of justice with our modern approach. And so restorative justice says, yes, crime involves a violation of relationships, and there is an obligation within justice to repair the harm that was caused. And it means sitting down with victims, offenders, and community. So we're trying to go a little bit deeper to deepen our reflection and our understanding. So as many of you have seen, although this might be new for some, criminal justice asks the three questions. What laws were broken? Who did it? And what do they deserve? What punishment? And restorative justice says, who has been hurt or harmed? What are their needs? And who is obligated to repair that harm? So it becomes an inclusive process. So this is sort of our foundation, and this is how we start to think about how can we connect this with our communities, and as we look at implementation. And I'm glad to hear that the manual that you have has really been developed through consultation with communities, and it's a wonderful resource. Because our understanding is that restorative justice is not like having a map, but it's like having a compass. It helps us get to where we want to go. But it will be up to you all here. For those of us, quote-unquote, international experts, we will go back to our different areas, and it will be up to you to actually roll this out and implement it. So we need to look at what are the resources that exist in our community. In the training we developed at the Mindanao Peace Building Institute where I work, we have a community-based restorative justice course, and we ask people to go deeply and then to paint a picture of what justice might look like. And so here, our participants have a picture of restorative justice that moves from conflict to healing, and you see three people here recognizing the three groups within Mindanao: Muslim communities, Christian, and tribal communities. And that there's a process and values, including dialogue, that will help bring about healing. Now we have a resource that exists in the Philippine context or culture. It's called the neighborhood justice system. It's kind of like, I think, the shalish that is here. We call it the Katarungan Pambarangay. So this is the lowest level of dispute resolution that exists in the Philippine community. And it is literally called a peace council, the Lupon Tagapamayapa. And it includes 10 people, and community cases would be referred to this group who is sort of attached to the local government, the village head, and then they will be involved in trying to reconcile this. One of the challenges that has happened in the Lupon Tagapamayapa is they have, because of the modern system, they have sort of assumed that they are like judges. And so they just sometimes will tend to make decisions without much consultation. And so what we also tried to do is develop a process for them to understand and develop a training manual to tap into a more traditional or cultural way of implementing justice. Another development in the Philippine system is called the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Reform Law that was passed in 2006. And I'm told that I have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to have to move along. But this institutionalized restorative justice and diverted all youth under the age of 18 will not go into the criminal justice system, but are referred into the social service system. So the thinking is that this is a far more appropriate process or way of handling it than sending juveniles through the criminal justice system. So this is something that has been passed, and then they recently amended the law, improving the law, and is a resource that we have. Out of all these developments over the years, since the mid-90s when restorative justice started to be discussed in the Philippines, several concepts came out of their understanding. And one is that restorative justice focuses more on the past and the present. Some people will say, oh, it's also the future. But it's really looking at how do we repair the harm caused. Now, as Filipinos interacted with this and they applied it in the Philippines, a former judge, she came up with this concept of transformative justice, and she said, we need to look at how do we transform it for the future, and how do we rebuild our social, cultural, and institutional infrastructure for this. So it's looking at the present and the future, and I think that's where we are actually at today here, is looking at not just restorative, but transformative. It takes perseverance to do that institutional work. It's hard work to change an institution. The last element that has come out is what we call healing justice, and they're saying we have to look at how justice efforts will bring about healing. So this, folks, is not past or future; it's inside out. How do we bring healing through the process of justice? So when we look at conflict transformation and restorative justice, conflict transformation tells us that conflict is a normal part of life. And so we want to move past a conflict management approach where we might deal with a conflict out in front of us, but behind us, we're going to get you. I'm going to get you. I've got a bomb behind my back. And conflict, we can try a conflict resolution which is focused on the issue, but oftentimes still sees conflict as the problem. So in our little picture here, it says, we would like to have Mr. Birdie over for dinner. So the cat wants to invite the bird over for dinner. Now, will he eat the bird or serve food to the bird? But the problem, conflict is still there. Conflict transformation says we want to see conflict as an opportunity to maximize change in our communities. So in the implementation of restorative justice here, there will be conflicts that come out. People will have different ways of wanting to do it. Those can be seen as challenges or barriers, or we could say these are opportunities to actually refine and improve how restorative justice looks in Bangladesh. So it's like having a different set of glasses. And we're not just looking at what is the external, but what is the invisible aspect of conflict or injustice? What is the relationship, and how do we untangle those relationships? And that means dealing with the harm. It means looking at things not just the personal, but the relational, the cultural, and the structural elements of transformation. And I will just leave you with not instructions, but some questions to look at the personal and interpersonal levels. How do we set up a healing justice process that allows for the collective untangling of these invisible aspects of conflict, especially in our culture where we value honor and dignity and how we interact together, not just between the parties, but the extended, the families and the clans around it. And at the cultural and structural level, what positive social and cultural leadership and community resources can be tapped into? Maybe they're there, we haven't tapped them. Maybe they need to be re-energized, they're asleep, we need to wake them up. Or they need to be reconfigured and adapted into the current situation. We don't assume that all indigenous or traditional processes are restorative. Things can be changed, and some things need to be changed in order to fit into the current reality. And I'll just close with this. Restorative justice can provide a coherent framework for transforming macro social structures that cause harm. Looking at the structural element, restorative justice brings us back to the relational aspect, and I would suggest the cultural aspect, so that we can transform these things. These challenges can become opportunities to tap into the local wisdom, the cultural resources that exist, to effectively implement restorative justice. So, daghang salamat. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.